So, Rebecca, I have a bunch of emails today about people becoming friends or romantic or sexual partners to their therapists, or even like adopted by their therapist.
Oh, wow.
Like their therapist becomes like their pseudo mother or something. And I want to go over these emails and read them. What do you say?
Yeah.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk. I'm a therapist and a professor.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Bloom. I am a licensed mental health counselor in South Seattle. I specialize in complex post-traumatic stress. I'm a workshop leader. I have a workshop on using tarot in therapy. And
where do they find that workshop?
You can go to cascadiatraining.com or .org. I have a very oddly successful menopause and mental health workshop. 50 people are coming by the time, it's probably around the time this podcast airs. So that's up from 30 people last time. So I think I'm onto something here, Kirk.
Yeah. And probably you'll have that course again in the future.
Yeah, it's running 4 times this year.
Okay.
that's just the baseline.
Yeah.
We'll see. But it's kind of amazing. It really struck a chord of like, I knew that course needed to happen, and then I launched it, and a bunch of other people were like, yeah, I've been waiting. And I was like, me too.
Yeah.
So I've got a tarot deck on Etsy, on rtext. And if you enjoy me, you can find me on Instagram at rtext.
Yeah. Letter R and then text. Anonymous patron, they write, they say, I understand that therapists forming sexual and romantic relationships with clients is considered unethical, and it also may be grounds for losing their license. But do the same rules apply to therapists forming friendships with current clients? I recently met with someone who disclosed that they have started to establish a friendship with their current therapist and have been meeting up as friends outside of their scheduled therapy sessions. I was taken aback. As someone who's been in therapy for years, I find that the established boundaries between therapists and clients are part of the reason why therapy has been so transformative for me. And I cannot begin to imagine how they could manage their transference and countertransference as friends. I would love to hear your feedback on friendships between clients and therapists, as I'm sure there is a lot more nuance to this question. Rebecca, what do you think?
I mean, I would say the power dynamics are so off that I don't know how that would work. I mean, part of why therapy works is that the person knows that they don't have to know anything about you and that they can just speak from their experience. In fact, I have a lot of clients that will say that, like, oh, sometimes I feel shy for how much I talk about myself in here, but they know that that's the point. So, if you switch up that dynamic and you have other times where you hang out that's not the case, I can't see therapy being that effective anymore. So that's not something I would do. And I just listened to all of your ethics podcasts that you did with your lawyer, that, you're not supposed to have dual relationships with your clients. That's the whole point. And I would want to find out from this therapist, why can't they uphold that tenet of our field?
Yeah. Well, anonymous patron, you're wondering if there's nuance, and
there is no nuance.
I will say, yeah, there's no fucking nuance.
There's no fucking nuance. God damn it.
It's unethical. It's selfish. It's incredibly risky for no benefit, really. It's self-serving for the therapist. I want a friend. It's fucking stupid. It's self-destructive for the therapist to do this. It makes us all look like idiots. It confirms all the stupid tropes.
Go find a friend another way.
Yeah.
Put the work in.
Yeah. I mean, I often say therapists keep it in your pants, but another extension of that
keep
is...
that coffee date with someone who's not your client.
Yeah, it doesn't really have the same ring to it as keep it in your pants, but, we're saying... doing stuff like this also confirms all the stupid tropes in movies and TV shows
which
that therapists...
I hate.
Yeah.
There's so many shows, people are like, do you watch that? It has a therapist in it. I'm like, that therapist is not a therapist to me, and no, I can't watch that show. Like Psyched or whatever, the one with Harrison Ford plays...
Yeah.
I can't watch it. Can't watch it.
No. Yeah, me neither. Also, it's like, how desperate of a nerd do you have to be as a therapist to friend your client? Like, how sad.
Well, right, and
Like,
the
get your
dynamics
own
that they
fucking
like
friend.
you because you listen to all of their problems.
Yeah.
Or they like you because you're calm and funny. I am such a different person out of the office. You know, I'm flakier. I'm crankier.
You're a human being.
Yeah.
You're not your full. You shouldn't be your full self as a therapist. You were there to do a service, and you were there to be very safe and very consistent. And when you introduce a friendship, presumably you're going to be yourself. It is going to, at the very least, risk ruining the treatment, if not completely ruin it, or head it in a really weird, fucked up direction. And for a therapist to become friends with their client, especially during treatment, this is the tip of the iceberg for sure. For someone to do this, I have a hard time imagining
That they're not doing anything else.
that all their other ducks are in a row. I'm just going to take a guess and say that half of their ducks are not in any sort of row.
And to be clear, like I have many clients that I am one person away from. And we talk about that dynamic and we make sure the boundaries are clear. And they'll even ask me, like, can I tell this story? I know you know this person. And I'm like, go right ahead. It goes in one ear and not in one ear and out the other. But like, I don't hold that stuff anymore because Seattle's a big town, but it's also a small town. But I understand what my role is in this town, right? I understand what my role is with them.
Yeah.
And it's not a friend. I don't know. I don't think it's the ground to build a friendship with.
No, it's a sacred, professional, boundaried, framed relationship, and it's not something small to fuck around with. And the main thing we're worried about is harm to clients. So it's not just this rule that we have because it's been done so much that we see the consistent harm. It's not like these rules are made like willy-nilly. Right.
It's like there's so much evidence that this doesn't go well, and it doesn't. 99% of the time, it doesn't go well for the client.
right, or for the therapist, honestly.
Because they're not going to get their needs met.
Yeah, or they're going to lose their license, or they're going to lose all
Respect from their peers.
Yeah. And let's say that it even harmed clients 25% of the time.
That's a lot.
It's not worth it. Like
Any
as a therapist,
if a drug harmed people 25% of the time, it
would be taken off the shelf. So
not make it on the market.
you should, as a therapist, understand that, yeah, I guess if there's two humans left on the planet and the other human happens to be your client, then I suppose you might want to fudge on this rule, but there's 8
At that
billion.
point, you're not, at that point, you're so interdependent on each other for water, first aid, and food. That
But, it's like there's so many other people that you could be friends with. Why the client? Okay. So, it's considered unethical. It's, as you said, Rebecca, it's a power dynamic. Also, the treatment is forever severed, hopefully, honestly, because the client can't re-engage with you, even though this is actually a scenario where it's happening at the same time. And here is the key, that although clients in the beginning might even celebrate, they might even have been the ones to initiate it or something.
Yeah.
But almost always, in fact, anecdotally always, and I've heard many of these cases, the client always will feel neglected and used in the end. They will feel harmed. They will feel manipulated, even if the therapist was, for the most part, not abusive, because the therapist had a job to do and
they didn't do it.
Yeah. So there are...
We say no.
Yeah. Do you know the ethical codes that pertain to this topic?
Like the numbers?
No, like the categories of...
I don't think I don't
so
hold that kind of content.
Well, so the various different professional ethical codes always have something in there about sexual or romantic relationships with former clients. With current clients, obviously, that's like illegal in a lot of states, including Washington State, I think. But they're often talking about, okay, where's the line when it comes to a former client? How many years do you have to wait? And how do you make sure that you're not even harming a former client, that kind of stuff. But that is not friendships. Friendships aren't included in that. You could argue that a friendship could be heading that direction, But friendships are addressed in a different code typically, and it's less harsh. And they're talking about former clients, remember? Now, if we're talking about dual relationships, then in the codes, there is explicit talk about making sure that if you are to engage in a dual relationship, that you do so with informed consent with the client, that you do so after consulting, getting supervision, looking at all the angles, documenting all this, and justifying it. Because there are times when a dual relationship is at least manageable. Like,
well, and the classic example is like your client's kid is on your kid's soccer team.
right.
And you can't avoid that dynamic. What are you going to tell your kid? You can't play soccer because I'm a therapist, right? Like, and you find a way to negotiate those types. And it's usually awkward. I mean, I've been in that type of situation.
Yeah, in those instances, the benefit or the humanity involved in that justifies taking that risk. Because as you said, what are you going to do? Like limit your child's ability to even play the sport, that kind of thing. Yeah. So those are always the ways that we're considering this thing. But to willingly engage for no benefit in a friendship with a client, just because you want a friend, or even because the client wants a friend, that is like so beyond the pale.
Well,
like another dual relationship is you and I have clients, and if they listen to the podcast, we would
Yes.
have a dual relationship with them in that way. And so we have to manage that. We have to talk.
I have to talk with a lot. I mean, a lot of my clients will come in with things saying like, I heard you say this on the podcast, or somebody brought something up recently that I had no memory of saying. And I had to say, did I say that to you directly, or did you hear that on the podcast? Because like, it's a different dynamic if I'm specifically saying something to them, as opposed to like if I'm generally saying something to the whole world. So yes, things get very complicated, and I have lots of complicated conversations with clients. But I'm thinking about clients who have relapsed intensely. And if I was their friend, that would make things so hard for me to say the level of care that you need right now has increased. If we were friends, I don't know if they'd listen to me, as opposed to the authority that I have as their therapist.
Also, they would be justified in showing up at your house under that crisis, because isn't that what friends do?
That sounds so awful. My house is my sanctuary. Don't come to my house.
Right. And another therapist or another client finding out of
That
yours.
I have that dual relationship, right? If word gets out that I'm like friends with Bob, but not friends with Karen, why is that?
Right. Karen's going to be upset. It's absurd. It's probably the tip of the iceberg. Most of the ducks are not in a row. Having said all that, it depends on the type of therapist and the type of therapy. There are rare therapists who have extremely limited scopes and styles and types of presenting problems that they work on. For example, if all they did was 3 sessions of habit change, like smoking or some kind of habit, simple habit that they want to work on, and there's no trauma involvement, there's no long-term therapy, then one could make an argument that it's not that much of a risk, especially if the therapist kept things professional enough and terminated at a certain point. So there's that. I don't know of a single therapist that is like that, but I've heard of therapists having that kind of style. So there's that. Another is that if the therapist lives in a small community, as we always say, and the therapist reasonably concludes that the client won't be harmed by it. But again, it's not hard. Usually what we're thinking of here is a former client. I have a hard time imagining any scenario that would justify, even if you were in a small community, that would justify being friends with a current client.
And the people I know who've gotten in that dynamic, I have, it's like, I hate to say it's not therapy anymore. I don't know what it is, but it's not, you're not that person's therapist. And, maybe, I have to think of what the motivations are of the therapist. Like, oh, you just feel like if you spent more time with this person, things would be better, or, oh gosh, you like them so much, you would be better if you spent more time with them. But there's something really messed up in that dynamic. Like if this was a movie, this is when the creepy music would start.
Or it would just be a movie about a therapist and they think they're representing us accurately because that's the
And
way
they
Hollywood-
never do.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting. I am so waiting.
There's
for...
one movie. There's one movie.
What is it?
It's called Hope Springs with Meryl Streep. And
Does she have a tiny ass office? That's the other thing.
It's Steve Carell is the couple therapist. And from my memory, it's a couple therapy course in which the therapist is always professional and, from my memory, also competent-ish and never
Does
wants
she
to
have
have
a
sex with
tiny
her.
ass office with a tiny window? Because that's the other problem is they always put us in these like grand, huge, fucking $5,000 a
Yeah.
month offices with like velvet furniture and like a huge wall that just has books on it.
And a massive desk.
Yeah, it's like no. Or one of my favorite shows for the therapeutic relationship. It's not completely appropriate, but there are some wonderful dynamics. Is Monk? Have you ever watched that show where he has
Little bit.
OCD? And his relationship with his therapist is really beautiful. But the therapist has this office with a huge plate glass window that looks onto a courtyard with a fountain. I'm like, no one has that office. Not even in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Can we stop for 1 minute? I have a favor to ask.
Yeah. And in addition to this, if the therapist had reasonably concluded that being friends with a current client was worth the risk, which would be bizarre, and that harm would be extremely unlikely, which would be bizarre, then the therapist would also have to seek consultation at the very least, if not supervision, and document all of that process. And the therapist would have to inform the client about this additional relationship and about all the risks. And the client would have to consent, maybe even sign something saying they consent to this change. And all of that would be documented and possibly approved by a lawyer or a colleague or something. And the therapist would have to periodically assess the risk and consult and document about all of that. And I'm just going to take a guess and say that all of those ducks don't even exist, let alone are they in a row.
And let me just say, as a 54-year-old in a major city who, like, I have gone through periods where I try and go out and find new friends, and it's work. And I would say to most therapists, make the time to go and do that, because that's the way you should be finding friends.
Yeah, not with your clients. All right, well, it gets worse from here, Rebecca.
Oh, good, because...
let's take a break and we'll get to there.
Happy Tuesday.
All right, we're back from the break. Anonymous patron, she says, I began seeing a psychologist 2 years ago when I was 22. She is 20 years older than me and caring in a way I cannot remember experiencing before. She has a very warm charisma about her. We have an intensity in our personality in common, and there is a rare recognition of oneself in the other person. She said I was her all-time favorite client and that I feel kind of like a daughter to her. I was completely in love with her. I thought about her all the time. I was jumping around in a world that seemed more colorful than before. It was never romantic or sexual, just in a child-parent kind of way. However, after some time, I would feel sad and lonely, so I would message her, but she did not have time for me. In moments like this, the pain would become so intense, and I got sick to the point of throwing up. Later, she would be kind, and I would forget about it. Rebecca, so far, what do you think?
Are you watching Eve? Did you watch Eve?
Is that the one
This
about the
psycho
murder?
killer? Yeah.
Yeah, I saw a bit of that show, yeah.
Yeah. Did you see the one where she's the consultant on psychopaths comes and works with the group a little bit?
I don't know.
And then he ends up working a little bit individually with Eve, who's clearly going off the rails and out of the scope of practice for her job. And he really confronts her, and he's like, are you doing things you've never done before? Are the highs higher and the lows lower? Like, he's assessing her for kind of inappropriate addictive behavior. And so, right, when there are these times where things have jumped so far out of the range of normal, you know, if you don't get, I mean, I don't know, maybe this person always throws up if they don't hear from somebody that they just texted. But, you know, that dynamic is already, for me, kind of out of the range of normal and so heightened that I would begin to send up red flags then.
Yeah, okay. So keep that in mind as we move
Because
forward.
it gets worse from here, everyone.
Eventually, we agreed to end the therapeutic relationship and become friends, although it was more like a semi-adoption, really. This was a year ago. She still says that she loves me and that she will always be there for me, but she does not want to see me very often. I feel like I am standing outside in the dark and cold, kind of like most of my life.
Yeah, because the dynamics outside of the session repeat inside of the session.
Yeah. Not because of the client, but because of the stupid-ass therapist going on. But there is also this love going both directions. She tries to be there for me, although I feel like I give nothing of value back. She still messages asking how my day is going and what I'm feeling. And I feel torn. My emotions are pulling me in different directions. The cycles of love and depression and anger are still there, but my emotions are starting to calm down. I am so grateful for her, and I am upset at her at the same time for leaving me here because all is not well. So just chiming in, the way I hear what she's saying is that the therapy was very intense and very close, and her experience as a client was she felt very special, but she was a client, and she was getting her needs met in that way because the client or the therapist was there as a pseudo mother kind of figure.
Well, and I wonder too, like, did the therapist get supervision that said you should end the treatment? Probably didn't get supervision that said you should continue a text-based relationship where you say that this person's very important to you, even though they're no longer a client. So, like, I wonder if they did half of what their consultation or their supervision agreed, or their moral compass kicked in. Because it's interesting that they terminated with the client. So I'm curious if they knew in some ways that it was too close.
Maybe. Yeah. But if I were her consultant, I would say the closeness is exactly what this client needs. So keep the frame and don't fuck it up. This client obviously has a history of being abandoned or withheld from or abused or something. And yeah, she's got some intensity with you because that's what she's working out. So keep the frame and don't make any kinds of statements and stop telling her that you're her favorite. You can certainly treat someone. I mean, have you ever told a client that they were your favorite?
No.
Have you ever thought that a client was your favorite? Or was very much looked forward to?
There are some people that I work with that I love working with.
Yeah.
But the problem is if you tell someone that they're your favorite and they need to regress or backslide, I'm curious if they will feel like they can't because you said that you like the way that they were behaving last week.
Plus, if it gets out, and also it starts to insert your own needs as a therapist into the equation when it doesn't need to. There are people that I've absolutely thought were my favorite clients, and I treated them very well, and I had a lot of enthusiasm working with them, and I kept my countertransference in check, at least I think I did. But I never said, you're my favorite. I might say I really like working with you, but I would never say you're my favorite. That's such a childish thing to say as a therapist.
Well, and also there are clients that I've hated working with that I ended up loving working with.
Yeah.
Would I say that to them? You're my least favorite client. And then when they become someone I enjoy working with, would I then tell them that? No.
Yeah. Now, could someone say you're my favorite and that's the only kind of mild breaking of the frame and it doesn't go wrong? Maybe certainly, actually, I could imagine that happening, but this is
That
all
is
in the same
such
kind of
charged language. I mean, there's so many. I don't know. I know that when I tell clients, I really enjoy working with you, they love that.
yeah.
But that's usually when they're in their lowest moments, and I want them to know that they matter.
Have you ever felt that you were connecting with a client in a way that felt more personal? Like you're just like, wow, like I could see us being friends. I'm not going to be their friend.
Right. Well, I mean, there's certain clients that like I have really interesting crossover with, like especially a queer therapist serving queer clients. There's a level of understanding and familiarity that we have that's, it's special. I think that any marginalized group has that feeling towards each other. But I know that it's, because of that broader identity, I know that they probably feel that with lots of queer people, and I feel that with lots of queer people. So, yeah, I would...
What about like person to person, like soulmate? Maybe not that far, but you know what I mean? Best friend.
That's kind of... I barely like people. I mean, I have that relationship with my dog, but yeah, I barely feel that with my closest friends. I feel that with you, and I feel that with like maybe a handful of other people on the planet. But I'm not looking for that in the therapy room, which I think makes it different. Like I don't need that. I don't even need, I mean, unlike some therapists, I don't even need to like my clients to work with them. Like my job is to address the issue at hand.
My mind is in a completely different spot.
I'm not looking for that.
Yeah. I imagine if I was in some stupid universe to be looking for that, I might have seen it maybe 20 times more often than I have in my life. But I have occasionally, maybe like I don't remember who, but I vaguely remember a couple times in my 30 years thinking, oh, wow, like there's a connection here between us. We get each other and are in each other's kind of vibe. We understand each other like very quickly, and I just make a note of it, but it doesn't go any further than that. I'm not like, well, maybe we should be friends. I'm just sort of like, oh, that's interesting.
But like in the hellscape that is the second Trump presidency, where people are trying to decide if they should stay in the country or can keep their jobs, or people are having really deep existential crises. I will say that there's a level of connection with clients that I'm feeling right now that is new. And it's just because we both know that we're equally terrified that like some friend of ours is going to get swept up and iced tomorrow and, potentially end up in a Venezuelan jail. Like there's a level of terror that is connecting me with a lot of my clients right now, but that's not love. That's like complete panic.
Or solidarity or something. Yeah, going on. I'm so grateful for her, and I'm upset at her for leaving me here.
I even forgot what we were talking about because I'm so disturbed by this.
Oh, she's talking about having a pseudo-mom.
Do you know about the cult that was in Olympia, this woman Connie that got disbarred? She created a dynamic like this with her clients. And I think probably hundreds of people ended up in this cult, where she would insist that people did individual therapy with her, did multi...
You said disbarred, you mean...
What do you call it when we lose our license? She lost her license. Yeah. In fact, I don't even think she was licensed. She then attempted to go to graduate school, and people found out and alerted.
When was this?
This was... probably ended 10 years ago, but went on for about 10 years. And she would tell people that she was their parent now and attempt to like reparent them and like hold them in her lap and do all of this stuff. So this dynamic occurs. That's all I want to say.
Yeah. Psychopathic, perhaps narcissistic in the pathological manner. And
maybe I'm very curious to interview the therapist to find out what the relationship she has, if she has children, what the relationship, is she attempting to do some kind of fucked up reparative thing with this client where she's in complete control.
Right. Like her own kids have rejected her and she's trying to replace that. Yeah. So
We
to
are
review,
psychoanalyzing you.
so to review, anonymous patron is saying that she started seeing this psychologist 2 years ago, and the therapist is the psychologist 20 years older. And I think after like maybe a year's time or something, they terminated and became friends, but more like mother-daughter. And their relationship also scaled way back in terms of how involved
But
she
that's
was.
also what a weird parent-child relationship that is.
Yeah. And interesting,
like that's
right?
I mean, that's like
You're going to be, if you're going to become someone's mother, you would think there would be more contact, right?
right. Like I think about what my kid needs from me. They don't need to hear from me for months, but oh my God, the minute they need me, it's like we're back at a 24/7 job.
Yeah. So going on, I'm so grateful for her, but at the same time, I'm upset at her for leaving me here because all is not well. Can she not see? Does she not care? Worse, when I do see her, it is never as good as I wish it to be. That
How could it be?
Yeah. That hole in my chest is still there.
Yeah.
Somehow that disappointment hurts more than being left alone. The relationship is painful, but I don't think it's possible for me to find a better relationship with someone else. I have an easy time making friends, but I find dating impossible due to my emotions. I am quite sure that I'll never be able to find a close person to me. In this confusion, it would help a great deal to hear your honest thoughts on this situation. The side of me that loves her has a hard time hearing about her being unethical or doing anything wrong, though I know most therapists, including you, probably think so. But I want to defend her. I want to tell you that she understands me, she listens to me, and she cares about me.
And this is like, if you know any kids who've been abused, this is kind of classic.
Yeah.
As they defend the abuser. You know, this all happened because she loved me and I was special to her. And this is like the language here.
Yeah.
And I'm not reading it here, people. I'm just responding to the audio.
Right. And also, it can be true that this individual, in a sense, in a real, authentic sense, does understand her, does listen, and does care. All those things can be true. The therapist in question doesn't have to be inherently psychopathic or abusive, but the poor decision making and the selfish or chaotic nature, or the fact that this therapist doesn't understand their own needs for friendship or to have a pseudo daughter or something, is sneaking out and is resulting in harm. So that's a part of it that I feel like I really have to emphasize, that people get into this confusion all the time, whether it's this situation or more commonly if they're in an abusive spousal relationship or an abusive friendship or abusive parent situation. And they're confused because they see a lot of signs of abuse and grooming or being victimized, in some way. But their heart is telling them that this person does care, does love them. Sometimes that's brainwashing and self-convincing, I suppose. But sometimes it's accurate. You can absolutely be loved and cared for and paid attention to in a very real, authentic, quote-unquote, good way, while that individual is absolutely victimizing you. Those two things can exist. And in our society, and among some clinicians, dare I say, will claim that cannot be true. You cannot have a victimization happening where the perpetrator has even 1% the humanity that the rest of us have, which is just so inaccurate. If you actually look at abusive relationships of various kinds, even the horrible kinds, the perpetrators that I would treat after having been convicted, because imagine how bad it would have to be that, right? These individuals, for the most part, were not psychopaths. They had empathy. They did care. They had major problems, and they were abusive, but they did have a heart, and they did love. So the fact that it's quite possible that she does understand you, she does listen to you, she does care about you, and there's a problem here.
Right. And the dynamic that she's offering you, I think, speaks to the way that she knows this somehow has to be limited. She can't offer really what being a parent would mean to me. And I wonder if this is really what parenting means to her, the therapist.
I'm just trying to figure out anyway, going on. Lastly, as a medical student and as a human, I admire your compassion and willingness to rest in not knowing. I hope I will have some of that when meeting with patients in the future. Greetings from Sweden. P.S. Please wish me luck because I am moving in with 3 of her friends and colleagues
Lovely.
in 2 weeks. My therapist and I did not tell them how we met. Instead, we told them that we became friends after meeting in yoga class. Rebecca, what do you think?
Well, that's always problematic when you can't be honest with someone.
Yeah.
And I wonder if her friends and colleagues would move in with you, knowing that she was a former patient. I worry about you having to hold that secret. And if there's going to be a time where it spills out, especially if you feel like vomiting every time she doesn't write you back soon enough, your roommates are probably going to notice. And finally, once you start really seeing clients, it'll be or patients, it'll be interesting to see if you would do this dynamic with any of your clients or patients. If you do perpetuate this pattern, we have a problem and you need to get supervision.
Yeah.
Because this is a pattern you do not want to continue.
Yeah. I mean, there's no indication that she would do anything like that, but it is a worthy warning. So the big question that I have is why the fuck would a therapist terminate with a client that you're connecting with that needs you and then transition to a withholding semi-mother relationship in which you're not even really there as often? I just don't understand what the fuck was going on.
Do you want my theory?
What?
So I think that the therapist knew that the relationship would get even more inappropriate in the session. And that,
because of the therapist's inability to withhold the frame?
Yeah. And that this is some kind of stopgap effort. They think that they're doing less harm by doing this, by saying she's no longer my patient. I email, it sounds like she texts, I don't know, once a day or less. And that this feels like a safe dynamic to the therapist. She doesn't feel like she's breaking any ethical codes. It's so creative and specific that I think it's somehow soothing the therapist.
Yeah. That
and
fits.
I've watched an entire season of Eve, so if that's based on that.
So the final thing I'll say is that this is kind of askance from it, is that being a good therapist is not just being warm and nice.
No.
Being a good therapist...
It's breaking hard truths.
Being a good therapist means that you're a fucking professional and that you understand that you have a clinical role and a clinical, almost sacred responsibility to have your shit together, which might mean actually, as you were getting to, Rebecca, making sure that you have your own friends, making sure your romantic and sexual life is buttoned up as well as it can be, and as certainly doesn't start bleeding into your client work. It also means that you aspire and endeavor to have the highest level of self-awareness you can possibly have within reason. It also means that you constantly remain humble, especially when it comes to our own impulses versus
don't do it.
The standard of care. I mean, the fact that this therapist is telling her, don't tell my friends how we met.
Don't tell your roommate how we met.
That should tell you something. The
right.
therapist knows.
Yeah. How long can you hold that secret?
Yeah. So I'm sorry this is happening to you.
Yeah. I would also recommend binging all of Younger, where there are many people in the show that hold many, many secrets, and you can see how it tears them apart.
Yeah. All right, let's take a break, and let's hear one more. What do you say?
Oh, God.
All right, we're back from the break. And these are just the emails that I've received in the past couple months.
Right. I mean, you've done a bunch of kind of ethics stuff, which I've really enjoyed listening to, and I'm curious if there's been an uptick, or do you get these all the time?
I get these all the time.
Wow.
All the time. Yeah.
No wonder you have to stand. So just so people understand the dynamics of today, Kirk is standing at his ballistic hydraulic desk, and I am sitting under a blanket. I have 4 different beverages. I've topped myself on the ADHD beverage selection here. I've got 4 beverages going.
Yeah. If I sit, all sorts of bad things start to happen, both to my spine and to my brain. But anyway, anonymous listener, she says, I have PTSD, complex PTSD, social anxiety, and cyclothymia.
What is cyclothymia?
It's a mood cycle that is more pervasive to the personality, I guess, without getting into detail. But anyway, when I first came to see my therapist, I was still in an abusive relationship. When I first came to my therapist, I was still in an abusive relationship with a drug addict, trying to keep both myself and daughter safe. I was initially intimidated by him, but also immediately attracted to him.
Bad boys, bad boys.
About 4 months, the therapist, he suffered a personal tragedy that I believe is what opened the gateway for him to violate a boundary he never would have otherwise with me. I firmly believe that his tragedy opened a hole he was not able to heal, and he sought comfort in knowing that a younger woman desired him. I am 14 years his junior. I think my attention made him feel alive during a time when he was struggling. He made me feel safe, heard, seen, and protected. And that's when our affair began. We continued therapy for another year during the affair, but then stopped the therapy after a total of 1.5 years of therapy. As of this email, it has been 3.5 years since we started the affair.
They're still active.
Yeah. I'm writing because I love this man with all my heart, and I want to protect him. He has been there for me through a lot, and I have been there for him as well. He has been there since the first day of undergraduate school for me. He has paid for my books. But I am suffering. I feel bad for his wife. I know she is suffering too, and she even knows who I am.
Oh, God.
Part of me wants to go to her and cry my eyes out and tell her I am so sorry. I never meant for innocent people to suffer, just so that I could feel love for the first time in my life. However, I am starting to realize that he used his knowledge about me from therapy to make me feel loved. The logical part of me knows there had to have been some manipulation by him, but part of me is excited that he went through the trouble to get to know me well enough to do that. But another part of me is disgusted with myself for thinking that manipulation is romantic. Rebecca, just chiming in, what do you think so far?
This is a horrible story. The stories keep getting worse. So the dynamics here are so messed up. This therapist could lose their license. They should lose their license. I'm surprised the wife... So the wife knows the affair is happening.
Yeah.
I'm surprised she hasn't reported him. The fact that they are staying together is, I'm curious, makes me wonder if he's done this before, that this is part of their dynamic, that he is unfaithful. The power dynamics are so messed up. Please get out of this relationship. This is just as bad as the relationship you had with the drug addict. So if you look at abuse, there's something called the wheel of power and control. And this relationship ticks off so many of those dynamics. But the fact that you feel manipulated by his previous knowledge of you is psychological abuse, straight up, no questions asked. The fact that he was your therapist is straight up sexual abuse. No one would argue that.
Right. And this is why, even if the therapist is not psychopathic in the various scenarios that we've been watching or reading, learning about, it is often a viable conclusion from the client that, wait, so when I was pouring my heart out in the beginning of this relationship, when I was just a client,
was he calculating
or even just using, because as soon as you as a client, as a therapist start putting your own needs into this, like I need a pseudo daughter, or I need a friend, or I need someone to have sex with, then it's a viable conclusion, even if you're not psychopathic and even if you weren't doing it on purpose, so to speak, that vulnerable information that was gathered in a very specific safe-ish, what's supposed to be safe, but obviously wasn't safe relationship, was used by that therapist because they had that power, even in the nicest of scenarios where the therapist is struggling and, it's hard to imagine, but, there's a spectrum between true psychopathy kinds of therapists and
can I
like
just give
messed
an
up
example?
therapists. Sure.
So after my mother died, and long-term listeners of the podcast know this, I was messed up. And I had to go back to work. And there were certain clients that I told. There were certain clients that I cried when I told. But I held the frame of my job even though I was grieving. And if I couldn't, I needed to take more time off. Like, I would have had to have taken that financial hit. Because it's not doing anybody any favors to go to work when you're in no place to go to work.
Did you think about that? Like, where was the line?
I
how
really
would you know?
wondered. I mean, the most interesting thing, and it's still true to this day, is I'm now chronically late. I was never late. I was 10 minutes early to everything before my mom died, and something in me broke, and now I'm late all the time, and I have to apologize to, especially like this was never the case for me, but like often the first client of the day, I'm 5 to 10 minutes late. So it's like I know something in me is still really broken and my time management skills are messed up and I can't do all the things that I need to do. If I would have been... So what dynamics would I have stopped working? If I was unable to stop crying in the session, if I was unable to stop talking about my needs, if I was spacing out so much I couldn't remember what the client had said to me, if I began to think of inappropriate dynamics between the clients because my heart was so heavy. There was a time when I was in a car accident and I got a concussion and I had to tell my clients, like, I've been cleared to work, but just so you know, I'm looping. Like, I have trouble moving forward. And they were all really understanding until that dynamic changed. But, I could have seen that I could have needed to stop working then. So, like, this happens in our field. And that's one of the reasons that this job is so hard, is it completely 100% relies on your mind to be functional.
Right.
Which isn't easy.
And it was clearly on your mind even possibly before you had any kind of problems. Like, as soon as you noticed that you were going through something emotional, before any impulse happened, before any countertransference happened, you immediately said, I need to monitor this, and if I'm even close to causing harm or detriment to the treatment, I need to take a break, and I need to take the financial hit, and I need my clients to take the hit to the consistency of the therapy. So that's different than I think what we're hearing in all likelihood from some of these therapists, is that they're now this one. I'll spare you the weight that. I think this therapist is straight up psychopathic, which we'll get into in a second. But anyway, so going on, now that I'm in graduate school trying to become a therapist myself.
Right. How on earth do you tell your peers about this?
Well, it's not the victim's fault.
Right.
At all.
Yeah.
So going on, in no way do I want to harm my clients. In my university, in our first semester, we have already had to sign a do not harm oath. Mm-hmm. And take an oath to gatekeep the profession of counselors so that we are the safest possible for our future clients. Just chiming in. This sounds like a different country, does it not? Because I can't think of I've never heard of a program in the States signing a do not harm oath or taking an...
should.
Right, but I can't... But
good idea.
That sounds like... Which is fine, but I've just never heard of actually taking an oath. You know what I mean? Like an official oath. I mean, we take an oath of sorts, but not like signing a thing. Anyway, going on. If my morals are so off as to sleep with a married man, what might I do with my future clients? How damaged am I truly? And if I am not worthy of being a counselor, I have wasted not only years of my life in school, but tens of thousands of dollars. I don't know what to do. I cannot see another therapist for advice or guidance because I'm paying via insurance for therapy with my current therapist, and that would be insurance fraud. So, Rebecca, do you know what she's saying here?
I disagree with what she's saying.
But do you know what that last sentence? Do you know what she's saying?
You tell me what you think she's saying. I don't know.
She's saying that the therapist is charging therapy sessions with her.
Oh, the guy she's having an affair with? She's calling that person her therapist?
I mean, I see. I cannot see another therapist for advice or guidance because I'm paying via insurance for therapy with my current therapist.
But she said
and that would be insurance fraud.
She said that she's no longer seeing the man she's having an affair with for therapy. So she's seeing a different therapist. I mean, if you can't tell your therapist that you're having an active affair with your former therapist, I would hope that you could say that. There's no insurance fraud happening here.
No, because I think.
Oh, you think there is? All right.
No, I think she's in grad. I think she knows insurance fraud, and I think when she says current therapist, she's talking about the guy she's having an affair with.
That is insurance fraud,
right? I don't think she would say insurance. She's saying I can't talk with another therapist about what I'm going through because my current therapist, the guy I'm having sex with,
who's not your therapist,
is charging. Is charging for therapy
for your sex sessions.
Yeah, because if she was actually seeing another therapist, she would have worded that differently. She would have said, and by the way, zero victim shaming here. By the way, this is you are a victim that this fucker has put you in. You have nothing to do with this. It's all on him. Yeah. That's all I want to be very clear about that.
There's no timeline for talking about trauma, but I will say, the sooner you can get out of this dynamic and start talking about it, the sooner the healing begins.
Yes, exactly, yeah. She goes on, I cannot afford out-of-pocket expenses as I'm a disabled individual and I'm a single mom. I'm also afraid that someone might turn him in.
Yeah.
I don't want to hurt anyone, but I know it is far too late for that. I feel terrible for his wife, and I know she has every right to hate me. I know this man will never be with me as a full-time partner. And I also know he would throw me under the bus in a heartbeat if it meant saving himself. Part of me desperately clings to believing at least part of this man loves me. Then another part of me worries that he is doing this with his other clients as well.
Yeah, there's a chance.
Yeah. I sincerely, with my whole heart, want to help others like me thrive and to heal. Yet, due to this situation I'm in, I don't know if I can ever be the healing place that I want to be for others.
I would disagree with that.
Yeah. How
so? I mean, my trauma history, it's insane. But I'm able to be there for other people, and probably because I've been through so much. And, this will be part of your story. It's not all of who you are. But this man is killing your soul.
Right. And this is how victimizers, perpetrators.
Look how good he's made everybody in keeping the secret. You, his wife, probably other clients he's done this to. Like, he really knows what he's doing.
Right. Right. This is how perpetrators continue to perpetrate from within the victim. You are beating yourself up about being a victim. You're beating yourself up to such an extent you think that you wouldn't be a good therapist because there's something wrong with you, even though he is a fucking perpetrator. So let's go over all the reasons. I'm not.
I feel like this is Law and Order. We're going to list all the crimes here.
Right. So
dun, dun, dun.
You noticed with the previous two, I wasn't going this far because there wasn't the data. Let's look at the data. One, he's having sex with you, so that's different than the previous two. And two, he's going against the law in all likelihood.
Two, he's billing for the sex he's having with you.
Right. He's committing fraud, which he wouldn't have to do. And honestly, that part, if I'm reading that sentence right, that is the icing on the cake, because you need that extra little fee every week. He could easily do without that.
I'm very upset with this man.
Yeah.
Very.
Also, hell
hath no fury.
Also, that, quote, he would throw you under the bus in a heartbeat if it meant saving himself. The fact that you want to protect him and that you care about him, and yet you know this to be true, says that you've gathered enough data to know that he doesn't actually care about you. He cares about himself. And the fact that he's cheating on his spouse and the spouse knows about it and he's continuing to do it. Now, might there be some soft underbelly that he shows you or some kind of warmth? Maybe. Like I said, even full-on psychopathic individuals who just walk on everyone, they can have genuine human emotion, contrary to what, the TV shows or what the internet will claim. So make mistake about it, though. Even in the email that you provided, there are so many details pointing that he lacks empathy, or at least is on that spectrum, and is only caring about himself, is narcissistically caring about himself. And you have done nothing wrong, and there is nothing about this scenario that prevents you from being a good therapist at all. And if anyone were to claim that, which I could see people doing, that's victim blaming. That is nothing to do.
I could see him doing that.
Right.
Yeah.
At the very least, maybe the way you've been treated, maybe throughout your life, is leading to you victim blaming even yourself. And the fact that he has so effectively quarantined you, so to speak, that you can't even talk with a confidential relationship like with a therapist, because if I'm reading it right, he's still your therapist. So you can't talk with your friends about this. You feel you can't talk with your friends about this. You can't talk with your program about it. You can't talk with a therapist about it. You probably can't talk with your friends about it. It's something that is completely isolating to you, and not for him, by the way. And the fact that you wonder if he's doing this with others, again, tells me that there are things about him or his behavior that indicate that he is like that, or at least that's a possibility, which is saying something. This is a high level of psychopathy, a high level. And again, I'll say that abusive people can be felt as loving, and abusive people can be felt as caring, and we can become legitimately and, in a regular human way attached to abusive people, but that doesn't mean that it's not abusive. So I've worked with other people like this. I've received emails from people like this at various stages. And as Rebecca said, the only answer is to get out. And there are years of...
And let me just say, if your psychology program is worth a dime, they will help you in some way. If you went to the director of the program and said, I am trapped in an abusive relationship with my former therapist, we are having an affair, I'm trying to think, if a student came to me with that dynamic, I would go out of my way to do whatever it took to help you, because this is egregious. Like, this is above and beyond.
Yeah.
And people will want to help you because they will understand the depth of the abuse.
Right. So
play this podcast for your professor and say, I can't even say it out loud. I need help.
Yeah. And with
let me say it for you to them as someone who's been a professor.
Right. And as with any abusive relationship, but maybe particularly because of this kind of abusive relationship, there are likely years or decades of recovery ahead of you. And as Rebecca was saying, the sooner the better. It's easier said than done. Extraction is not easy, and it's complicated. It requires often planning and support, and the messiness of disclosing to other people that you can trust, and finding out if you can trust them in this way. So this is not an easy situation. And I think from your email, that this has to end. And
right, there's a reason you reached out to us.
Right. And also, I'm terribly sorry on behalf of the field that this is happening to you. It's absolutely unethical at the highest level. It's harmful. It's completely antithetical, not only to the profession, but to humanity. You deserved so much better than this.
Yeah.
And you certainly did not deserve to be literally groomed. As you were saying, I think he used what he knew about me to get into, to transition our relationship.
And you will find loving, caring relationships. If not, probably not immediately. It'll be very hard to trust for a very long time. And I'm thinking back to all the clients I know that have come out of cults and very extreme abusive relationships, and they have found love again, either if it's through friendships, very close, loving friendships, if they found romantic partners. This relationship with this abusive fuck does not define your life.
Right. And, using the word cult is important because I think at least most of us understand that extracting yourself and recovering from and extracting your mind from a high control relationship takes a lot of time, and it's very complicated, and it's totally normal if this email that you sent was a part of an overall journey that you're on of extraction, and then hearing this response is another step along the way.
Right, like you wanted to check in with Kirk. What does Kirk think?
Yeah.
Is this as bad as I think it is? And to hear Kirk say, yes, this is even worse than you thought it was. Like, does that don't miss this moment. If you need to sit and cry or take a walk, let this sink in for a moment, that we are confirming for you that this is as bad as you thought it was, or maybe even worse.
Yeah. And if you were sitting in front of me, I would likely see a terrified look on your face, and I would ask you what that was about, and I'm guessing what you would possibly say as a part of that terror was, but I don't know what to do. I would say, don't worry about what to do right now, because it would be weird if you knew exactly what to do or exactly how to proceed in the next moment. That terror and that uncertainty is often reacted to by self-justification and denial. Don't feel pressured to do anything. And this applies to anyone that's in an abusive relationship. I would have so many conversations with people about this that it was always a part of, even if it wasn't brought up, I would say, and by the way, when I see you next week, if you have done nothing to move down the road, I will not even internally judge or criticize or expect anything different. This takes time. If you want to act now, let's do it. But if you don't, that is totally fine and frankly, totally normal. I would not expect anything else, honestly. So the steps down the road, many of the initial steps are internal, and also getting trusted people, and also telling those trusted people, I don't want to hear any pressure from you to do anything because I'm not ready for that yet. I just need someone in my camp. So you have to kind of cultivate that around you. And
the chance that you will go back to him. I mean, the average person goes back into an abusive relationship 7 times before they leave.
Right.
This will be a process, a painful process.
Right. So all that is normal, okay, expected, not your fault, and don't feel pressure, don't feel a rush, don't feel ashamed.
Yeah, and just a reminder that the most dangerous point in an abusive relationship is when you attempt to leave. You might see behaviors in him when he knows that he's losing you that you've never seen before.
Yeah. And I guess as a part of that, I would document as much as possible and save texts and stuff, because
and
if he does throw you under the bus, as you've been saying, it's very easy for psychopathic therapists to make a claim to authorities that you're crazy. And that can be hard to fight in some authoritarian structures. So I would, at the very least, even if you aren't necessarily planning on leaving, I would just sort of start passively keeping records of things just in case. Because, he could, in a way, I guess, if he were effective, he actually could threaten your viability as a professional in this field if he were to convince people of something. I don't know. So I'll also tell you that I'm 100% sure that this is going to blow up somehow, because it always does.
Right.
Even if you don't do anything, it's going to blow up.
I mean, the wife could finally get sick of this and leave him, and it could blow up over there.
Right. You could leave, or someone else another client could report him, or he could leave you. something like that is definitely going to happen. And given your email, I'm 100% sure that in time you will recover enough that you will look back on your time here and have hopefully a lot of sympathy for the mindset that you're in, given your life. This is probably has to do with your entire life and attachments and exploitation and abuse. And you will look back and say, oh, yeah, I know why I was beating myself up. I know why I was trying to protect him. I have compassion for that earlier version of me, but I've grown so much, and I now know that I'm worth more, and that other people can be trusted. There's a lot of trustworthy people in the world that deserve my trust and my vulnerability and my efforts. And I didn't know that at the time. I thought that was as good as I could get. I thought I should take whatever I could get, and I thought that's all that I could ever get. I thought that's all I ever deserved. So that's my hope. And I again, given your email, I would have a hard time seeing otherwise. It's just a matter of how much time it takes for you to get from A to B. If you hit it with a good pace and a pace that is tolerable to you, it'll be sooner than later. If you don't do that, it could literally be 60 years from now or something when you finally look back.
I worked with a client that left an abusive partner after 40 years, 40. And, man, had it taken a toll on her. I mean, she would regularly say that people thought she was 20 years older than she was, and she regretted that it took so long and we worked on it so much. And she had a mental breakdown and institutionalized herself for a while because the pain was so intense of starting over.
Yeah. But do not blame yourself.
Yeah.
All that I'm hearing is
go
innocent,
forth.
good person, good-hearted person, a person with a lot of love
that
and wisdom.
Be able to serve clients who've had really intense experiences.
And someone who deserves to be with a partner that doesn't put you in a position like this. Okay. And that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle.
I'm exhausted.
Everyone out there.
I already worked a full day of work. That was like a lot.
Yeah,
but I'm glad we did it.
This is the first time we've recorded at night.
Yeah. I'm always happy to talk about these real situations because this is what people's lives are actually like. So can I put in a little plug for Lady Gaga for a minute? So I don't know when this podcast will come out, but Lady Gaga has a new album called Mayhem out, and she's really out on the circuit doing stuff. And she did an episode with Bowen Yang on Los Culturalistas. Have you ever heard that podcast? It's great. But in it, Bowen Yang gets to say directly to Lady Gaga that I knew I was gay, but I had gone through conversion therapy, and I was back in the closet, and your song Born This Way came out, and I sang it nonstop for days and days and days, and I decided to come out. And it's so touching and beautiful. Like, I was sitting there listening to the podcast, like sobbing, thinking about that he gets to say this directly to the person that allowed him to do this. And then she has a radio station on Sirius XM. Sometimes they let people do this where it's like all of their music, but it's also all of her favorite music. So Purple Rain came on the way here, and even though I was stuck in Seattle traffic, I was belting out Purple Rain, thinking about that it means as much to Lady Gaga as it means to me. So as with most of you guys, I am like hit so hard by the Trump presidency. I actually spent 3 days in my house. Like, I just could not get going. I needed that level of rest. So I'm just realizing, like, I think we're all in the same boat where, like, the level of exhaustion is something that I've never felt before. So whatever you need to do to take care of yourself right now, I hope you guys are all doing it, because it is rough out there.
And in here with these emails.
Yeah. Man. Do you ever get emails like, I love my puppy so much. Here's a cute picture of my puppy.
Not usually.
Please flood Kirk's emails with pictures of cute puppies.
Well, I think Rebecca needs it more than I do. Go to Rebecca's Instagram and DM her.
Yes, or tag me in photos of your cute puppies.
RText, RTEXT is the Instagram handle.
Cute puppy alert. Yeah,
And take care of yourself because
I'm getting a box of produce delivered in my house. I'm getting those vegetable pouches where you just suck the food into your body. I'm like deeply going into self-care, reassessing food and like what I need to do to keep going.